just give it another 30 seconds. Okay, so welcome everyone to this month's Beyond Wellbeing Live. I'm Kirsten Samuel, the founder and CEO of Camwell, and I am super excited to be hosting this conversation on how leading organisations are rethinking wellbeing and culture in 2025. So to bring this to life, I'm joined by three fantastic leaders who are each driving meaningful change within their organisations. So first up, a big welcome to Sian Evans, who is Simply Health's Head of Leadership and Development. Simply Health is a purpose-led health company. Some of you may also know them for their health plans and dental plans, and they have spent the last 150 years improving healthcare access for everyone in the UK. I've been really fortunate to work with Sian for the last 5 years, and she leads on a very impressive range of business priorities from leadership development, culture change, DEI, and well-being. And one of the things that has always impressed me is Sian's ability to operate at both a strategic level and at a practical level, connecting the dots across big picture business priorities while also delivering real impact on the ground. So welcome, Sian, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And we also have the wonderful Beck Stockdale from Elsevier. So Elsevier is a global leader in information analytics, research and scientific publishing. And Beck leads their global and I should say award-winning wellbeing program called Mind Life, which supports over 9,000 colleagues worldwide. And Beck and I have known each other for 6 years ago, right from the very beginning of their wellbeing journey. And it's been really great to see the program evolve and the positive impact that it's having, not just on colleagues, but also on the wider culture too. And I know we'll touch on some of that today. And Beck's energy, her heart and can-do spirit are genuinely something to behold. And I know, Beck, that is going to come across today. And finally, it's a pleasure to welcome Jane Baldwin, Director of Corporate Responsibility at LexisNexis Risk Solutions, RISK for short. These guys are also global technology and data company. And Jane oversees the company's impact on people, communities, and environment. And Jane and I go right back to at least 10 years, Jane.
Yeah.
When Camwell first started working with Risk, they've got operations spanning 24 countries and over 10,000 employees. And one of the things I've always really admired is Jane's thoughtful and strategic brain and her ability to communicate complex messages in a very clear, compelling and human way. And finally, just as an added note, both Elsevier and Risk are part of the same parent company, RELX Group. They are one of the top companies in the FTSE 100. So it's also a great opportunity to ask any questions around how you can support different businesses and brands within the same group, particularly when they might have their own unique cultures and challenges, but obviously a shared commitment to well-being. So that is more than enough from me. I'm going to take a breath. We've got such a wealth of insight around the table today. So why don't we dive in with the big picture stuff first? So the link between employee well-being and business success has never been clearer. I think that we are safe to say that. Yet we're still seeing many organisations struggling or being very slow to join up the dots. Why do you think that is? Sian, perhaps if I can come to you first on that.
Yes, I think some organisations just don't know where to start. I think it can be quite a big thing, and they might have a lack of resource or budget, and some just don't see it as a priority yet, which is unfortunate. I think also for us, we use a lot of data to reinforce what we do. So maybe some don't have the level of data that we have, and maybe a lack of senior sponsorship sometimes can really impact that too.
Yeah, that's. I mean, there are definitely some key areas that we see playing out in a lot of organisations that are fairly slow on the uptake. What would you say to business leaders though, who still see well-being as a nice to have rather than a business imperative? Beck, I know you've got a really fantastic leader at the helm of Elsevier.
You'll be left behind. I mean, eventually you will be left behind. There is no doubt that the rate of employment and the change in the employee structure that we have means that there is an expectation that you think about sustainability, you think about wellness, you're accountable for the care of your employees. And to come to work and not to have any profile that enables you to do that and to show that means that eventually employees will choose to go somewhere else. And I feel really strongly that if you don't arrive at an organisation that already has wellness at the heart of it, you're never going to be that settled, because it's an expectation today that you're taken care of at work.
I think that is, I think it's fairly given now, actually, because, you know, back in the day where people were jumping companies for the increased pay packet, it seems to be actually nowadays it's more about the health and wellbeing benefits, the culture, all of those other things. Is there anything else you would add to that, Jane or Sian?
Well, I'd say that as far as the leadership piece of how to convince leaders that this is not just a nice to have, you know, we all know that unhappy, stressed, anxious employees are not as productive as happy, unstressed employees. And also, but for leaders, I think you need to meet them in the space that they work in. So they're very concentrated on revenues. They're concentrated on the talent, on their talent and their performance. And actually, there's some real studies out there. There's a whole heap of studies out there that show how well-being impacts all these things. So I think meeting leadership in the space they work in, around budgets, around revenues, around talent and performance is really quite important.
I also think the younger generation, the first thing they ask for is what's your health benefits, you know, what's your purpose? So you're not going to be able to recruit that younger talent if you don't have a focus on it, which is so important.
I know, Sian, actually, a couple of years ago, Simply Health became B Corp certified, which is a big deal in your space. Have you seen that that's helped with kind of the overall employee value proposition?
Definitely. I think colleagues are so proud to work for a B Corp organisation, and definitely in our partnership network, you know, we really value working with other B Corp organisations because we know that they've got the same principles at their heart. So it definitely has made a big difference.
I've certainly noticed when we've been, you know, trying to win new contracts, actually, when you go through the governance and the due diligence stage, there's a lot more questions creeping up there around what you're doing for your own internal colleagues.
I think also COVID had a big impact, didn't it? I think there's been a lot more focus on wellbeing since COVID. So I think that's also driving some of the interest in really focusing on wellbeing.
Definitely, yeah. It was definitely a big shift at that point, wasn't it? So
if you weren't in it, it was difficult to get in it. I think, you know, I was very lucky that we launched in 2019 with Camwell, and we were just bubbling at that point. But we were bubbling with a community that were already interested in wellness in Elsevier. So when the pandemic hit, we were in a position to be able to pivot really quickly to a huge home-based environment of support. I can imagine if you were in the thick of it in March 2020 and didn't know where to start, you were really floundering to try and support people that were at home, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting because we are seeing more organisations becoming more committed. But one of the challenges that we see is, how do you go from being committed, but how do you go from moving from ad hoc initiatives to actually truly embedding wellbeing into your organisation's DNA? I think there's a big difference there. Jane, what would you say to companies that are trying to make that shift?
I think, I mean, because I look after several programs as well, and this isn't just a well-being issue. This is, for us, it's an environmental issue, it's a volunteering issue, and it's an ERG issue. So and I think that the best way for us has been to come together as a team. We all came together as one team last year, and it enables us to be more of a force within the company. I think I think we need to, again, look at the business and see where their pain points are and what our people need and what our leaders need, and put in, especially around well-being, put in programs that are more bespoke for certain areas of the business, but also so like I'm just thinking like Q4 finance and sales are under an immense amount of stress. So you approach that from that point. But it has to be part of your organizational DNA. It has to be you need CEO support for this. I know we're all quite lucky to have CEO support, and the CEO and the senior leaders have to be seen to be doing it as well. So it's not just, it's not just a paper piece or a comms piece. They have to be seen to be taking part and being very active. But it is a massive part of our culture. You can't change it overnight, but it's a piece. It's always going to be a moving piece for us.
Do you guys think we're sort of jumping a little bit, but you just raised an interesting point though around it should be really integrated into every aspect of the organisation. Do you think we'll get to a point at some point in the future where we're not talking about well-being as an entity, so to speak, but actually it's just woven into the culture?
I think we might be a bit lucky because we do provide access to healthcare, so we have healthcare at the heart. So one of our purpose is linked to that, providing healthcare for all in the UK, and one of our values is altogether healthier. So I think we've really taken steps forward in embedding that mindset into our culture. We have our Love Awards, Live Our Values Every Day, and you can nominate someone for a Love Award against Altogether Healthier. So it is part of just the way we do things. And we started it with a fantastic programme with Camwell, actually, with Sally Gunnell launching it. And I think because people were so engaged at the start, we haven't lost that engagement. And we survey colleagues regularly just to check what are their health concerns that they would like more information on. And then we put on webinars to really support them. So I think it's just part of our DNA now, which is so lovely to see.
That's brilliant, and it's interesting to what you said. The kind of the data theme is already coming out here. The importance of data and using that to meet people where they are, really understand what the challenges are. Jane and Becca, question for you guys. Obviously, you are part of a big data analytics information technology companies. How do you guys gather and use data within your organisations to inform wellbeing and culture related decision making?
Well, I mean, I use an awful lot of Camwell data, actually. So, you have a great provision that helps me to support my colleagues on a monthly basis. But we also have an Office Vibe platform, which regularly surveys very quickly employees on a random basis every couple of weeks. Included in that is wellness. Two of the points are stress and well-being at work, personal, lifestyle balance, and we're constantly tracking those and we're monitoring those, and you can get deeper and deeper into the organization and begin to tailor, to Jane's point, needs if there are them in the business. We supported a large group of the sales force last year going into Q4. What did it look like for them? How were they going to manage? The problem with such things is the more you roll out, the harder it is for them to attend. So you really have to pick your moments. You need to be thinking about Q4 support in Q2, and then really thinking about how you can support their productivity and their wellness as you head through the end of the year. So we do a lot of data gathering. But I made a couple of notes when we talked about the data point. It's not just driven by data. Sometimes it only takes one person to come and say that made a demonstrable difference to my life for me to continue to run this program. We do a lot of very small scale personal things that make a huge amount of difference to one colleague. And that's quite unusual in a company of our scale. We put aside budget that will impact a person because their life has had a significant impact. And I think that's a really nice thing that we do. We hit the masses, we do the webinars. To Sian's point, it's really nice to hit a lot of people with good information, with good data. But sometimes when you just talk to one person and you make an enormous difference, that's as good for me.
I think that's definitely a change, actually, isn't it, that we've seen since COVID is, appealing to the masses, but also getting really personal and under covers of what the challenges are. Because actually, if you can change just one person's life in your organisation, then you could argue it's absolutely worth doing.
Absolutely.
That's always my philosophy. We recently had a colleague share their story of they have a son who has Tourette's and OCD and what it's like to live a child that has that condition, and the outpouring that individual got was just so fantastic, even to the point that, you know, people were saying, what else can we do to support the family? It was just absolutely fantastic. So the storytelling does drive colleague engagement and happiness, because there's a feel-good factor when you hear someone's story and you want to reach out and support them.
Yeah, and imagine the courage that takes, but imagine the repercussions of such courage.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a very much the same kind of thread going through this year, and you know, a bereaved parent talking. You know, people are really, an outpouring of support and love and all those kind of things that happens as a consequence is quite unique.
I think that really brings people together as well. I mean, you're trying to bring your people to a common place and make them feel like they belong. And I think there's nothing that makes people feel like they belong as much as sharing their story, or hearing other people's stories and sharing their own, and feeling that they have the permission to do that, and that they're not going to be judged for doing that. One thing I was going to say around data, Kirsten, is, gosh, we have a lot now. We've gone from having none to having way too much. And we have an NPS score across all of our programs, in fact. So anything we do, we have NPS, we have psych safety, we have employee opinions, we know who turns up, we know who registers and doesn't turn up, which is an indication of interest. That's quite a nice one to use. But we've got to the point now where we have rather too much data, and it's very interesting. How are we going to derive real deep insights from quite so much? I'm not a data analyst, but we're looking maybe to use our grad intake program, our data analysts from that, maybe give them a project to do around this, because we feel that we've got to a point where a real deep dive would be very useful for us.
Are you trying to standardize on key metrics across all of those programs, Jane?
I'm trying to look at what a super engaged employee looks like, how and why some people are incredibly engaged with the business, why others aren't, whether that affects their psych safety scores, their happiness working within the company, that sort of thing, their tenure. I think there are some links there, but again, not being a data analyst, I think I've got to the point where I need some help on this.
And well, you've certainly got the right people in your organisation to help, Jane. It's really interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, wind back a few years ago, it was the opposite. It was that we don't have any data, and organisations were sometimes paralysed to even get started. And, you know, whereas now actually we're going to a point where we have collected a huge amount of data over the last few years, and it's doing something with that's going to make a meaningful impact.
One of the things that we did, we have a pulse survey that we do 6 times a year, and we added in some health and wellbeing questions, and now that's part of our OKRs, the health and wellbeing score.
Nice.
So it's like front and center, and managers have really, and we've done some hard work, don't get me wrong, over the last year, just to get managers to respond to comments and to take ownership for this. But now it's really effective, and we're really proud of both our engagement score, but also our health and wellbeing score.
And that's critical, isn't it? Because if you make a comment about something, you shouldn't have to wait for a response. So I think that's a really important part of learning about what to do with your information, and then how to make sure that it gets to the right places. And not being responded to by a manager is almost worse than actively encouraging them to make a comment, actually.
And we've had to do a lot of work to actually help managers know how to respond to detractor comments, because some of those comments can be quite upsetting for a manager who's really trying. So we've done that support too. We've given that support too to our managers, so that they can respond to both. But I think we were at nearly a 90% comments responded to last survey. So really proud of that.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic, Jan. And when you think about well-being and sometimes the root causes of well-being, it's not often that, you know, the well-being provision is insufficient. What we see a lot in the surveys that we run is that actually sometimes the root causes of poor well-being actually lie in the workplace itself, whether that's unmanageable workloads, ineffective managers, or poor job design. How do you think we can reconcile this reality with a continued focus on wellbeing programs and initiatives.
Wow.
It's a big one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's one of the hardest things to create wellness programs that take people's time when they say they haven't got it. I find that the most difficult part of the role that I hold. And I say to people that come to me disgruntled and I'm going to have to try and make time for the recording is that, you know, we can't take away your workload. We can only support you with the activities we do to reprioritize. And I was very fortunate last year to be introduced to a company called Own Life Analytics. And we did Elsevier ran a pilot with them. And what they actually do is through a survey that we piloted, look at the correlation between well-being and performance. And the performance of an individual is entirely based on their wellness. And that's also driven by external factors that we can support. And that could be sleep, alcohol, diet, but it also is about the accountability as an organization to allow people to put boundaries in place. And we've had a phenomenal response for the 10% of the people of the organization that completed that. And we will look to do more with that organization this year. So it's all about you putting your boundaries in place, you being supported by your manager. And if you get those two things right, you'll see it dissipate through the whole organization. I think only then do we say, and you now have permission to take that hour to do the things that you want to do to further your wellness. But it is a really difficult position that we're in because we're never going to reduce workload. We can only support those individuals to better manage it.
I think that is a good point, though, that there has to be some accountability on the employee side as well. It's a partnership, isn't it? You know, you can take the horse to water with all of the fantastic benefits, initiatives, support, etc., but also they've got to take some responsibility. Is there anything else you would add, Sian, Jane?
I think we've looked at it from like a whole system perspective. So we've introduced wellbeing into our leadership developments. We give colleagues meat-free Wednesday afternoons so that they don't have to have meetings on Wednesday afternoons. And I think through our wellbeing initiatives, we recognise that, you know, we put on loads of webinars and the focus this year is on how can we help colleagues move to action, because ultimately they have to take accountability and to make sure that they manage their own health and well-being. We can provide all the resources and the education, but it is down to the individual, and that's a hard one to, as you say, lead a horse to water. It's a really hard one. You get frustrated sometimes, don't you, with if only you did this, you'd be in a better
or
place.
Didn't do this, which, you know, our iPhones at 11 o'clock at night, nobody's expecting that from you, and yet you would still blame the organisation for that behaviour.
Yeah. Have any of you done anything around really looking at culture? So obviously wellbeing's one thing, but looking at the culture as a whole of your organisation. Have any of you done work specifically around in terms of unravelling, you know, understanding the root causes within your organisation?
We've only just recently become the culture team. We're a people, culture, belonging team. So not yet, but we are a very large global organisation, as I guess are the others. And cultures are very different in different places. Working culture is very different in the US to China to the UK to Germany. You know, you've got so you have to. I think it's we have to be more mindful of the differences in different locations. I think at the moment we and I think when you're launching something as well, you're trying to get it out to as many people as possible, although like Beck we've done and Sian, we've done some wonderfully pinpointed things, but actually we need to start looking at culture a little bit more and what works. We're asking groups of people now. We've asked some of our APAC employees exactly what they want, because they are slightly disengaged, not least because they are completely out of everyone else's time zone.
Yeah.
It's quite difficult for them to attend things. So we're putting on bespoke things for them, but actually, what do they want? What's important to them? And it's quite an interesting piece to do. I think you need to do that. But for the culture of the business as a whole, obviously, there is an overarching culture to the business, but it really does differ whether you work in sales, whether you work in tech, whether you're based in Singapore, whether you're based in France. It's quite a tricky thing to get hold of.
We actually did a cultural audit last year with KPMG, and we got some clear actions that we needed to work on, and we've been relentlessly working on those actions over the past year, and we will have another survey in a year's time. So I think that's really helped us find some areas that we weren't even aware of.
Wow, that's really interesting. And so was that a survey and some focus groups, or just a survey, Sian? It was
both. It was survey and focus groups.
Wow, how interesting.
We're moving to a product-led approach, and that's what was driving it in terms of moving to product-led. What type of culture do we need to create? What culture have we got today? What are some of the things that we need to do that will support that move to product-led? And it was definitely a worthwhile exercise.
Very interesting, thank you. And now you guys are all I know Simply Health operate in the UK, Elsevier and Risk are both global organisations, and then you've got other organisations that perhaps have limited budget and resources than you guys have. If you were going to give them one piece of advice around one small impactful step that they can take to move their efforts forward, what would you have for them?
My previous boss gave me one mandate: start small but be global. And I remember sitting with you and Emma and saying, how do we start small and be global at the same time? And that was the biggest thing for me. You know, he said, don't boil the ocean, don't try and go out to lots of things at once, start small, build your networks. And we did. But one of the greatest things that we have are champions. My Mind Life champions are extraordinary individuals. I have about 70 globally. They are kind, caring people. They've received a lot of training, which develops them personally through the brilliant Culture Catalyst course that Camwell provide. They've been through that. They've been through mental health first aid training. If in the UK, we've also done our own program globally, which has helped them to benefit. They've had mindful communication training. So not only are they learning and developing themselves, but they're caring for our organisation. And it's quite an extraordinary group of people that volunteer their time, but they are me in all of these different countries. And, you know, my dream before COVID was obviously they'd be in all the offices, they'd be in the yoga classes, they'd be putting up the posters. Sadly, we don't have that anymore. We weren't an organisation that required a return to work in any form at all. So, you know, we have them sending out lots of tips of the week, things to think about, you know, sharing our data, sharing our information. But they are an extraordinary group of people that just continue to support us. And from the very first day, those 50 have grown, they've got smaller, some have left, some have come, but they were the people that really helped me to get going.
That's really incredible to hear that, Beck, because actually I think most organisations have this aspiration of creating a really engaged, quality community of champions, but sometimes the reality is a bit further from that in terms of they sign up, they get a piece of training, and then how do you keep them engaged throughout and really being those local champions? So it's great to hear how you've achieved that. And Sian, if I can come to you as well, I know that's something that at Simply Health you've really been actively working on in terms of your champion networks and also the new ERGs you're bringing on. Is there any other insights you would share there?
I think I totally agree. Start small. I think that also we surveyed, and I think that gave us information around what people are interested in, and then we could really target that. We have a fantastic group of mental health first aiders too. I really recommend mental health first aiders. And we also have values champions, which is really good for us, because if one of our values is altogether healthier, then we run quarterly sessions on helping people really understand our values and understand what that means for them. And the values champions run those sessions, they design those sessions, they're in those sessions leading them. So they're a, like you're describing, Beck, they're a really passionate group of individuals. You couldn't wish for a better group to go out there and spread the word and help others. So I think it is a combination, and I think those are the areas that I would start on.
Thank you, Sian. And Jane, anything else from your end? What piece of nugget of advice would you like to share today?
Literally have start small, get champions, do a survey, or maybe start small, do a survey, get champions. So we're all saying the same thing. You know, we have the mental health first responders, we have menopause mentors, but I completely agree with Sian, is that if you do a survey and ask people, what's your top three? What are the top three things that you're interested in? You instantly have a framework to hang your wellbeing program on. Because you have a mandate from your employees. They're telling you what they want, you deliver it, and go slowly. Don't feel you have to do everything instantly, that you have to have this. We started quite slowly. I would also, and you guys have already talked about it a little bit, use your employees. You have some amazing people who work for you, who've gone through some incredible experiences, and use them. If you don't have budget to hold a number of large webinars or events, actually bring your people on board and see what they can share. Your people who've gone through menopause, your people who have gone through bereavement. And I actually think that is incredibly impactful. So you can start very small, very inexpensive.
I mean,
and you'll be amazed who you find.
Yeah.
We have yoga people, we have so many champions that do mindfulness, and they put sessions on every week, and they just want to help. Once they've got a tool, they want to help, they want to share it, and so you go out there and find them.
And we also have in-office reflexology treatments and Reiki treatments, which everyone loves.
Amazing.
And health checks. And last week we did organised walks that colleagues could join, and Andover Mind then got some funding because of the charity walks that we've done. So I think doing things like that as well, getting colleagues involved, that's all related to well-being, is really good too. Some of the comments that we've had around, it was great to see so-and-so on the walk. Again, it's just building the community.
It's so good when you have charity or volunteering programs, and when you have environmental programs as well. And if you can sort of do all three at once, great. You'll get you can combine a few budgets there, and so someone goes and does a beach clean for a charity. Well, that's charitable, it's environmental, it's well-being, and we can pinch a little bit from each budget and give you a little bit more to work with, give our champions a bit more to work with. So we try to be quite canny and try and combine things as much as possible.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because one of our OKRs is volunteering hours. We've got 3,000 volunteering hours that we want for all colleagues. So we are doing beach cleans and planting trees. All colleagues will have 3 days this year. So we're really hoping to give back in that way.
That's great.
And none of the stuff that you guys have just talked about actually costs any budget. Who is the human behind the role? And I think there's nothing more powerful. Jared shared an interesting point, that the importance of storytelling is just so powerful in, either reducing stigma, or again, just showing that vulnerability and that you're human. So yeah, storytelling, employee-led. I'm hearing a lot about, empowering your employees, supporting them, and, really seeing them as valuable assets to help you scale your initiatives. Such helpful insights, and I guess a great reminder that even the smallest intentional steps can have huge change. But I would say the one thing that makes things so much easier is when you have the support of your leaders in the business. And so let's now just spend a little bit of time thinking about accountability, the importance of engaging stakeholders, the critical role that leaders and managers play in helping to shape your company culture and drive things forward. So with that, what would you say is the most effective way for companies to hold themselves accountable for real progress on wellbeing and culture? Sian, what would you say? You've talked a bit about your OKRs, but are there any other ways that you can really hold yourselves to account in terms of the work that you're doing? either a leadership perspective or more organisational metric perspective?
I think definitely the OKRs help because they put a focus and a perspective on what we need. We provide a health plan, so I think it's getting colleagues connected to our brand has really helped too, because it puts focus there. So colleagues can use their healthcare plan, which is part of their benefits, to get physio treatment. So we promote that internally so that colleagues can see the benefits that they've got, but also use the benefits for their own healthcare. And I think that helps as well to really drive that internal engagement and focus. And we have leaders sharing their stories really openly, and I think that again is the human touch on driving the agenda too.
I think when you think about the initiatives where you draw in the most people to them, it's always ones where leaders are talking about themselves or colleagues are sharing their stories. That really comes out.
I think it's so important for them to do it. And we've had leaders do sessions on imposter syndrome, which was quite interesting, on how they manage stress. And it's very interesting for people to see that someone even in the most senior positions in the company suffers imposter syndrome, because we all do, most of us do to some extent. So I think it's a way of feeling again, and it gets back to belonging. I can see someone like me, or even in a role that I'm not doing. But it's KPOs, as we would say. We have wellbeing in our KPOs, and so every manager has a KPO around volunteering, wellbeing, this cultural side. And also, but they must be seen to be doing it. If you're talking about your leadership, we had a menopause session, and it was led by one of our male leaders whose wife was going through menopause, and it was so impactful that he introed the session. That it was something a little bit out of the ordinary, where you wouldn't expect it, but he was so good and so supportive of his wife that he chose to do this. And it's brilliant for the leaders themselves, for reputationally for them, even sort of on a selfish point of view. Everyone was blown away that he had done this.
Wow.
Can I borrow him?
Yeah.
It's really good. But I mean, we are, along with statistics, the population that attends most of our events is female, and there is always that pull to try to find different things that engage a male audience. And I think when you see male leaders coming forward, MindLife has an executive sponsor. He is male. My human resources director is also male, and he supports the program and will advocate anywhere he can in meetings, to represent. He's kicking off one of our sessions in Family Week that we have coming up soon. They make real impactful change by representing and being willing to come forward and start sessions for us. There's no doubt.
Do you think the kind of C-suite sponsorship is where it needs to be, or do you think we've still got a way to go?
Personally, I think we've got a way to go. I think there is still a desperate need for managers in all of our levels to be going into meetings and asking how people are, and actively engaging with individuals before there's a crisis. In a crisis, we're an extraordinary organisation. We have too many of those that could be averted, I think. And I think if we had more managers and more senior leaders that were constantly asking the questions, constantly keeping an eye on the ground, we would be in a better position. And we are really very good. We could be
I think Becca's right. It's all levels. It's not just leaders.
Yeah.
And we're looking at the moment of it. You have quarterly career discussions, actually, they're sort of programmed into our KPO, our performance objectives. And we're looking at making one of those purely around wellbeing. because it's just not discussed enough. How is everything? Are you how is your workload? Are you feeling stressed? Are you feeling anxious? And we need to give managers, that some managers don't have the tools to do that, to have that discussion. It's somewhere, it's a little bit outside of their experience. So we're looking at how we give them the tools to have a meaningful discussion that has meaningful outcomes. But I think it's all levels, because I truly believe that the person at work who impacts your well-being most of all is your line manager. Your leadership is absolutely do, but it's mostly your line manager. So I think that's where we should be working a little more.
Absolutely.
We also have what we call Simply Health Social. So we have a excuse me, a Facebook page, and when we do any challenge, people will post their challenges, and then money goes to charity. And it's really fantastic when a senior leader will post what they've been doing. You know, so one of our senior leaders, she does cold water swimming, and she posted at the weekend, and you can see people responding saying, oh my goodness, how did you get in that cold water temperature? And again, it's the human touch, isn't it? And it's the connection, and it's just so powerful. I think I agree with you, Bex. We have a way to go.
Yeah. What do you think are going to be the most important leadership manager behaviours going forwards in this current new future of work?
I think it's definitely empathy and resilience. I think it's empathy to really be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and be able to have a conversation with them. And then it's personal resilience. I think people are waiting for change to stop, and it's just not going to. So your own personal resilience is a really key indicator of your own personal success. So definitely resilience is top for me.
I'm with you.
And as an organisation, we finally stopped talking about whether we will or we won't, or we will or shall we or shan't we, or will we go back to the office. And I think this becomes one of the biggest components of how you support a manager to support their teams. We're in an entirely different world where we don't see our employees every day. It's very hard for managers to really pinpoint a problem without some kind of structure. And I also feel empathy for the managers, because they're also receiving it down and they're getting it up. So, of course, our first line managers feel probably the most pain. And we have over 1,000 of those that have a small team, but then many more people above them. And they're the people we're really trying to get to, because they will make the significant amount of impact if we get it right with them, but also take care of them.
I was just going to say that, we've talked a lot about the importance of equipping managers with the tools, but actually how do we care for them? I mean, important.
We've done going back to that empathy piece. We do positive leadership training that we do through Camwell. We put as many managers through that as we can, and that is it's not only it's leading with empathy, but having ensuring the team works well, but ensuring that the manager works is not overloaded too. So it's both sides of that. It's not just how do you lead with empathy, but actually how do you look after yourself as a team, as a leader of a team. I think that's really important. Really important.
I think something that valuable that came out of that training, Jane, was that the training's great, but actually then the managers getting in a room together and kind of troubleshooting and sharing stories, and solidarity is equally important. That peer support.
Absolutely.
Is there anything, Sian, that I know in your role as head of leadership and development, I know over the years you've done a lot of stuff to support managers. Is there anything that really stands out that has really helped them either in their confidence or in their ability to either look after themselves or support others?
What springs to mind is we do a Leading with Purpose session, and in that session we get leaders to share their lifeline and share, what are the peaks in their life that has helped them be successful, and what are some of the troughs, and what has happened to them on those occasions. And sharing those with fellow leaders really deepens the conversation and then enables more support, because they're more aware of the individual that's in the room rather than the job title. And I think doing more things like that, where you can really connect to the human really gives a different depth of conversation, and therefore performance is just a given as a result of that. And it just builds life-lasting relationships. When you know someone's backstory, you can really see them in a different light, and you just appreciate them so much more. So we have included deeper sessions like that in our leadership development.
That's really great to hear. So really going deep with the leaders allows them that opportunity to reflect on their journey as well, and to share that.
And become more of a leadership community.
Yeah, how do you build leadership communities? Because I think that's possibly something that really would make a difference in organisations. You know, we're good at creating those kind of ERGs and those champion communities, but actually, how do we start thinking about creating great leadership communities?
I mean, it's difficult because you're relying on the busiest people with the busiest roles, the ones we're asking the most of, to create their own community. So it's really challenging. I mean, we have a people manager page on our Mind Life intranet site. It's got loads and loads of resources. How do you get them to it? It's still a question. We have a Teams site. We have, forums where they can come and discuss. The percentage of people that attend is relatively small, but we do constantly try to support them with conversation, with other things. It's there if they had time. The question, do they?
Yeah. It's an interesting one to think on, isn't it? Like, that's kind of, really thinking into the future. How can we actually support them? We know how well the communities work for other colleagues in the organisation, so how can we build that for the leaders? It's again, we're not going to come up with the answers today, but I think it is a worthwhile thought.
If anyone has it, let us know.
Yes. Do you think it's going to be really important that all leaders and managers have some sort of KPO or KPI in their role in terms of well-being?
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, if I had my way, it would be directly accountable to bonus eligibility. Said it.
It is for our leaders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, they should. They absolutely should. I think they're incredibly busy people, as Beck was just saying. You've got to get it in their KPIs. You have to get it in there. And it is vitally important. And it would be wonderful if wonderful. We do psych safety. I'm guessing, Beck, you do the same. I'm not sure, John.
Yeah.
Those pieces are very important. That's very important to calculate against your success as a manager. If you have low psych safety scores, that there are many reasons for that. Wellbeing being a part of it. So I think absolutely essential.
Yeah. So there's a good message to anyone that's listening in and wondering whether they need to be included. Absolutely is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, so just thinking about the future a little bit now. Jane, I know a big area for you is around people, culture and belonging. And we're hearing a lot about human sustainability at the moment, and how you actually redesign the new world of work so that it becomes more sustainable for everyone working within the organisation. How are you finding within Risk that wellbeing is becoming, how in Risk are you aligning wellbeing with your ESG goals? And should human sustainability be considered as essential as, environmental sustainability, for example?
Absolutely. And I think I mean, looking back on what we've done is we've spun up a load of programs like most corporates. We've got our volunteering, we've got our environmental program, we've got our wellbeing program, and actually those are the way we run them as a team. We have an early careers program, we have ERGs. We run them. Different people run those programs within our team, but actually we're looking at the way we present this to our employees has to be as a bit more holistically, a bit more as one piece of work around belonging or around culture, and we need to take our sort of back office process out of it and talk about it as one thing. And that all rolls into human sustainability. I mean, whether you're talking well-being or ERGs or volunteering, it does roll in this to this piece. We have a role at the moment for we're just about to recruit a human and environmental sustainability manager, so someone who's working across both of those pieces. I don't think we can continue being siloed for much longer. We can work, we can as a team, we can work on our own programs, but what we have to talk about has to be far more of one big piece of work around how we help our people and how we help our societies and our communities.
That's an interesting job title, Jane. Human and Environmental Sustainability Manager.
Absolutely, yeah, it is a very, very interesting one, and it's they've in our business they've been 2 part-time roles, so we're doing it as 1 full-time role. And we've had some very interesting applicants actually for that role, and it's a lot of people are very interested in that area, and I think there are some synergies between them.
So that's a potential new trend, isn't it? Role titles evolving from being kind of well-being lead to encompass a much broader kind of ESG, in culture, human sustainability principles.
Absolutely.
Really interesting. Beck, is there anything else you would add?
Yeah, I mean, the wellness program is probably still in isolation from everything else at the moment. We fall under we have what's called the employee experience at Elsevier, which has 3 columns, of which I fall under colleagues that care, and so do many of our ERGs and our and the sustainability element. But I think we still need to get better at delivering content that joins up all the dots, because one of the things we hear, there is too much email traffic, there's too many places that you point me to, and I think if we could get something right where you delivered content, people could pick the choices that they wanted, but it was the same content, we'd be better. And I haven't, you know, I want a Facebook for people to go and sign up for things that they enjoy, and you know, it's definitely on the agenda in the next couple of years to find a better way for people to have easy access to information that interests them, and across all of these platforms. Sian's probably got one though, because she's really good at this.
We haven't. I would say ditto to everything you've both said, frustratingly, because you think, oh gosh, if only we had a great site where everyone could just easily click on what they want. But no, that's our downfall. That is our downfall, systems access.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
But you guys have been doing so much great work in the kind of B Corp space, Sian. So slightly different approach, but I think there's been some real positive outcomes since you embarked on that. And then, like, the future of work. What is the future? What does the next era of wellbeing and culture look like? What do you think? Think about the new Gen Zs coming through, and
that's very different. I think their needs are going to really challenge organisations, and especially, don't want to work full time, want to have free time, want to have maybe multiple things that they do. I think that's going to be a real challenge on org design and the wellbeing agenda for sure.
Yeah, I mean, as a technology organisation, if we don't get it right, they don't stay.
No.
And recruitment is costly. Retaining staff is costly. So if you don't get the message right in the early days, you don't talk to them well in their first year, you don't make them feel part of an organisation despite being a home-based worker, they will not stay. No. And every time you then go to an external recruiter or you talk to somebody about recruitment, it costs you a lot of money. So it's really, really important to get that onboarding right, to get that care right at the very beginning, and know that they're meeting people, they're engaging with people, they're engaging with platforms that we have, because otherwise they just won't stay for you. And
actually it starts even before that, doesn't it? It starts at kind of attraction, recruitment stage. So you're trying to position your organisation as that organisation of the future that is going to allow and support all these very different interests.
And the days of recruitment where you appoint somebody and say, I'll see you in 6 weeks in the office, it's not good enough. The engagement begins the very day that you interview. And if they're successful, the engagement has to start right there and then. You know, you have to bring them along on the journey of even starting with your organisation, let alone what happens once they get through the door.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see if that onboarding process is going to come even more important now.
Yes, I agree. It will.
I'm hearing.
I mean, it is a sense of it. All comes down to, do I feel like I belong here? Is this where I should be? Am I happy here? And I think definitely starts the minute you step into that first, or the very first, you know, even filling out the form for a job. We should look at that very closely. But this belonging piece is not a one size fits all. The reason why I feel I belong is not the same as Sian or Beck or yourself. There are some common themes there, but things are quite personal, cultural differences, differences in your own, what's important to you as an individual. And so there isn't a one size fits all for this, but we have to do our best to try and make, I always feel, for me, is there, when I look at a company, is there someone like me there? Can I see from your website, from your job ads, is there someone like me? And that's my precursor to, do I feel like I belong? So I think a lot of the work we do around wellbeing has to start feeding into these areas a lot more, and driving some of the way we present ourselves as a company.
It's interesting because we've been doing a lot of thinking around, people are going to stay in the work longer, aren't they now? You know, so how do we support that generation as well, and make sure that, you know, their twilight years in an organisation are the best that they could be? And we're definitely in more of an ageing population, and you think you have to nurture that talent, because that's experience that will go out of the door if we don't nurture it. So we're looking at it from both sides, the younger generation, but also the older generation, and how can we make the workplace really super for them.
And to your point about the older generation, you know, we're in a sandwich society. We're all in positions where we have children. In my case, my child has a child, and yet I still have elderly parents. It's a lot for somebody to continue to do a full-time job, in my case, and know that you have 3 generations that potentially would rely on you for something whilst in these jobs. So the flexibility, the care, and the care of your own line manager that knows those kinds of underlying things that may affect your day-to-day, again, completely unique. And, you know, it's a need to know for the person that you report to. And I think as an organisation, if we got that really right for every person, we'd have solved it.
That's a great aspiration to have, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Supporting people through all life stages.
Yeah, absolutely.
We got 3 or 4 generations. You got 4 generations in your workplace, yeah, or is it predominantly 3?
Some have 4. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some
4.
Oh,
Yeah.
small percentage.
Very small. Yeah.
Yeah. Going to keep us all busy.
Yes.
For a while, I think. Is there anything else that you think, you know, other than considering the different generations, that you think might define the next era of wellbeing in the workplace that we haven't already spoken about? What about AI?
I was going to say automation is going to drive change. We don't know what that will look like yet.
Yeah,
You seen a lot of that in your organisation, Beck, Jane, just being data heavily technology driven already? Are you starting to see a bit of a shift there?
Almost certainly. Yeah. I think, and I think, you know, for me, who's somebody that isn't influenced by it currently in my current role, and yet it's there, and I know it's there, and I know it's making changes in our organisation. It's quite a, you know, an interesting future landscape for me.
absolutely. Just echoing exactly what Beck said. We don't use it so much in my team. Although when I was talking about having too much data, I know AI can help me with that. So maybe should start looking in that area. But it's how things are changing for our workforces rather than us personally in our teams, and we need to follow what the company is doing and the way people are working. So it's going to be a lot of change. But as you were saying earlier, change is never going to stop. It's been a constant. Nothing's been static. I mean, I've been with the company well over 30 years. It's never stopped changing. So change is the absolute norm. You know, we just need to be prepared.
Yeah, and I think that's the one thing that everyone can relate to.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just about out of time now. I just want to say what an incredibly rich conversation we've had. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Sian, Beck and Jane, for coming on today, sharing your insights and your openness and honesty and experience has been really great. And I guess it's clear that there are lots of challenges that, you know, some are complex, some less complex, but there's also a huge amount of opportunity to rethink, reimagine how we can support people going forward. So thank you to everyone who has joined us for this month's Beyond Wellbeing Live. Hope you've got some great new, fresh ideas from today, a little bit more energy, and hopefully a reminder that even the smallest of changes can have a real lasting impact. So until next month, thank you very much, and we'll see you then.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Cheers.